everyone. Welcome to a new episode for the Filipino Australian Lawyers Association. And thank you, Janina, for joining us today for today's podcast episode. Janina is a corporate lawyer based in Sydney. She specializes in financial services, backed by her experiences in renowned law offices in Sydney, in the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, APRA, and recently started her new position in an in-house role in Castle, a payment and data services provider. To start off, Janina, could you share us more a bit of your Filipino story background? Yeah.
Of course. Thank you, Diane, and thank you for having me on this podcast. So just as Diane mentioned, I am a financial services lawyer, having started at EY and navigated my way through to private practice, where I worked at Ashurst and Gilbert and Tobin. Then after having worked in private practice, I felt that I needed to know how a regulator thinks, and so jumped overboard to APRA, the Prudential Regulator for Financial Services. Then, being this ambitious type of person I am, I wanted to understand how it works in-house at a client, and was blessed enough to be offered an opportunity at Castle. In terms of my Filipino background, I was born in Australia, in Sydney. Have two Filipino parents. My dad is from Cabanatuan, and my mom is my mom's family is across various areas like Vigan and Quezon City. So they migrated here in the early 1990s, and so that makes myself and my three other siblings second generation Filipino Australians.
Yeah. From your work in the financial services, you've been recognized well by the industry about your work in financial services. I was just curious, could you share us more about any legal insights that you think that the audience, Filipino Australians or the law, the audience generally, about any legal insights in financial services that people would be glad to be more aware of?
Yeah. So essentially, my role over the last couple of years have been advising banks, insurers, and superannuation entities on how to comply with financial services laws. So we assist. I previously assisted these clients to make sure that they're complying with the laws, and then ultimately their customers, are protected by those requirements. I guess in the most layman terms.
So I guess the intention of financial services laws is to regulate the institutions in the financial services industry. And these laws are really to mitigate consumer harm. If I'm just thinking about what are some current reforms that are happening today that affect everyday Australians, I guess more recently the government had introduced the Scams Prevention Framework, which is the intention being to protect everyday Australians from scammers and make Australia harder for scammers to target. The Scams Prevention Framework, it's the first legislative attempt to combat scams, and it introduces mandatory requirements to combat scams and would primarily be inserted into the Competition and Consumer Act. The Scams Prevention Framework, or the SPF, it's part of a broader effort to modernise Australians' laws and has really the following key features. So overarching principles such as governance, preventing, detecting, reporting, disrupting and responding to scams, which will apply to such regulated entities. There will be sector-specific codes which set out some minimum standards for each entity in relation to how to address scam activity. There will be an external dispute resolution scheme, which is essentially the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, or AFCA, which will enable consumers or everyday Australians to make a complaint to AFCA as a third independent party. And then I guess the SPF will really be enforced by the ACCC, which is the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. And there could be potentially civil penalties of fines up to $50 million for a contravention of the SPF. So really the framework will apply to banks, telecommunication providers like Optus and Telstra, and digital platform services relating to social media. Essentially, the SPF will really provide everyday Australians with clear pathways to seek compensation if a business from banks or telecommunications service providers or digital platform services, if they fail to meet the SPF. Another one, I guess, is BNPL products. So buy now, pay later. So previously, buy now, pay later products weren't regulated, and they have now been inserted as a regulated product under the National Consumer Credit Protection Act, or the Credit Act. And I guess the whole intention of this was to strike the right balance between giving Australians access to innovative products, but also ensuring that they are protected from potential harm, which credit products may potentially do. And I guess to date, they were not regulated because they didn't meet the definition of what a credit product was, but because they had previously fallen within an exemption in the credit code. But now, I guess with it being in the Credit Act, BNPL products now being regulated credit products, BNPL providers will now be required to hold an Australian credit license and abide by certain responsible lending obligations or adhere to consumer protection requirements in the credit code. Essentially, how does this affect everyday Australians? What does that mean to me? Well, for example, because BNPL providers will now need to hold a license to issue these products, they will need to be subject, or they will be subject to licensing and licensee obligations, such as ensuring that their credit activities are conducted efficiently, honestly, and fairly. Also, they will need to become a member of AFCA, or AFCA's External Dispute Resolution Scheme, which essentially means that customers will now have an avenue to complain to an independent third party, being AFCA.
From our past conversations, one thing that I'm really interested about is the cultural diversity aspect and your experiences about cultural diversity aspect, being a Filipino lawyer in Sydney and in Australia in general. So for the cultural diversity aspect, could you share us more about your journey experiences and culture shocks that you experienced in Australian culture as a Filipino, in your personal experiences with your family, in law school, and also in the work setting?
Yeah, of course. So in the last couple of years, I guess ever since I landed at Cusco, to be honest, I had never met another Filipino lawyer. So in the almost 5 years of working in the industry, I've never met another Filipino, even like a lawyer or a business professional. It's been very hard presentation. And I guess it wasn't until I found out about the Filipino Australian Lawyers Association that I met Filipino lawyers, not corporate ones, but, just Filipino lawyers in general. And then I guess when I landed at Cusco, I saw so many Filipinos and I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is really weird. So I guess in terms of culture shocks, in the industry that I work in, I don't see a lot of Filipino representation, and there could be a whole raft of reasons as to why I don't see that, but it's nice to be a part of something like this and to potentially advocate in this section, because had I known, if a Filipino lawyer came to my high school or came to uni to speak about their journey, it would have motivated me 100 times more, because I'm such a believer in, you do what you see, you believe what you see. And because I couldn't see that in the industry that I worked in, I felt, maybe I'm the only one. So I think that was the biggest shock for me. But that's not to say that the firms that I worked at or the places that I worked at were not diverse or multicultural at all. Like they were. There was definitely programs in place to raise awareness, things about like women in law, to advocate for diversity. So there's definitely programs that law firms and companies have put in place to raise awareness, and that's just something that I love and was always a part of, especially at G&T, where I was a part of their RISE program, diverse women in law and things like that.
Yeah. Just from that, because we're really grateful that you're on board with FALAW now. Could you share us a bit more about your motivations to it and what initiatives you think that are good for FALAW and that you could share with us? Yeah.
Yeah. So how I stumbled across FALAW was because I am a member of the Asian Australian Lawyers Association, and at the time they partnered with an event. FALAW partnered with AALA, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've never heard of this association before. And I remember reaching out to Rochelle, and she was like, oh, this is amazing. Great timing, Janina, because we're based in Melbourne but want to expand to Sydney. Would you like to help with that? And I was thinking, oh my goodness, yes, of course. So my motivations and why I'm so excited about this is because it just comes back to what I've been reiterating throughout this podcast, is that I haven't seen Filipino representation in the legal industry in Sydney. And I'd like to be a part of that. And I guess my not an ultimate goal, but like one of the things that I would love to see is being able to attend high schools and primary school, I guess high schools predominantly, in Western Sydney, and showing them, hey, like, I'm a corporate lawyer, I'm Filipino, there is Filipino representation here. And that's, I keep referring to Western Sydney because there's a lot of Filipinos in Western Sydney.
That's great. Thank you for that, Janina. As the final part of this podcast, could you share us more about any advice that you could share with us from your experiences for any aspiring lawyers or students, taking up law?
I think when you think of a lawyer, you don't think corporate law, financial services. It's a very specific and it's a very niche area. So I think for law students going into law, just have a think about how, like, what your law degree could give you and enable you to do. Having a law degree doesn't mean you have to be a lawyer. It could mean that you can go into consulting. You can go into any aspect, really. It's up to you. But just make sure you make the effort to know all those different opportunities. So really go to those events hosted by FALAW or hosted by Diverse Women in Law or AALA. They're all free. So just connect there and speak to those people who attend, so then you can yourself be connected with that. I am a very strong believer in connections, and it's about knowing people. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't make connections. So I think really connect with those events, connect with people there, and ask those questions, so then you have all the knowledge before you make a decision. That said, you can always change your mind and you can always move. I started in consulting, and I moved to law, and now I'm quite fortunate enough to have a consulting legal mindset, which is really what clients want to know. They want to know the legal requirements, but they want to know how to operationalize it. And so I feel as if the way my pathway has been fantastic, because I now have both mindsets, and I can apply it to what I'm advising on today. So I think don't be worried about the pathway or the journey. Make sure you connect with people, and just ask questions. I think you're so junior and you're in your start of your career, so there is literally so much time ahead of you. So there is no mistake that you can make.
Thank you for that, Janina. For joining us today for today's podcast episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Diane.